There are really two versions of Raspberry Pi operating system, Raspian, and one is the regular version with the desktop, and the other is the light version with no desktop. And if you're memory constrained or you're SD card constrained, then it makes sense to do the light version. But I never do. Every time I've got one of these guys, I do a full install, and then a lot of times on a Raspberry Pi W or a W2, or is it a 2W? Anyway, Raspberry Pi 2W. I realized that I really wish I had more memory and less, CPU doing stuff that wasn't important to me for some of these embedded things or quasi-embedded things. And in that case, I really don't want to do a reinstall. And, my standard install is the standard operating system. And so now I've got myself in a box. And the advantage of doing the full installs, I might have other tools that I need for other stuff, right? But what I don't want to pay is the memory penalty. And I didn't realize how big the memory penalty is. If you look at this, you can see that, with the no desktop, I use 50 megabytes of memory. And if I use the desktop, I use like 220. And if I have a no desktop, I end up with like 260, I guess, just judging from the graph. And if I have a desktop enabled, then I only have 60. So, I get an extra 200 mega memory for my programs if I turn off the desktop. So I could go and reinstall with Raspbian Lite and LITE, but instead it turns out I can just disable the desktop and leave the software on there because it's not taking up that. I'm usually not constrained on my cards. SD cards are cheap now. And so what I'll do is I'll just disable the desktop. And if later on I need to SSH in and then turn on the video so I can go run some tool or something, I can just re-enable the desktop. And how might we do that? So we're going to do it with raspi-config. And just to be clear, the numbers I got on that graph basically came by running the free-m command right after boot. And then I ran sudo raspi-config, and then I moved through all the screens I'm going to show you below, and then I rebooted, and I ran the free-m command. So you can free up a bunch of memory by doing this. Okay, so if you look at this, basically you run sudo raspi-config, you pick the system options, you decide you're going to pick the boot auto login options, and then what normally happens is you're in B3 here, desktop GUI requiring user login, hopefully. Or maybe not, but you should. And if you're doing an embedded thing. And so what we do is we just pick B1 console. It doesn't uninstall anything. It just disables the desktop. And that gives you the memory that we were talking about, right? You really can, your free memory can basically go up almost 5 times, right? And so you can free up all this space, and if it turns out you need it back, you can do it. And so I highly recommend running raspi-config to disable that if you want to have the full image every time. Or if you have smaller cards, I guess you could do the light version. But for me, I just do the same everywhere and then disable the desktop. And here's the 2 tables for this. Like I said, you basically go from 61 megabytes free to 265 megabytes free. Right, so that's over 4 times the free memory just by making this change without having to delete anything. And if you need it back, you can always get it. So that's what I do. Install whatever you want, disable the desktop with raspi-config. You can always bring it back.